welcome back to the BWIB interview series. I'm here with Natalie. I can't say her last name. I don't want to butcher it. Send help. But I will let her introduce herself. Yes, Natalie, if you want to do like year, name, major, and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, so my name is Natalie Kuhnhold. So I'm a senior at UC Berkeley, obviously, and I'm double majoring in business administration and economics.
And just really quickly, what's your position in BWIB?
Yeah, I'm the internal vice president. So I was previously VP of marketing and VP of admin, and I've kind of stuck it through. So now I'm the internal VP.
Yes, we love that. So just going in really briefly to like your college experience and stuff. So you mentioned like you had a lot of involvement with BWIB, and also before this you mentioned like the ASUC. How do you think like your clubs have like molded you professionally and personally? And yeah, and we'll jump into the roles more later, so you can like briefly touch on like strategy and operations and stuff. But definitely just overall, just how your clubs impacted you.
Yeah, so I would probably credit a lot of like my career development to specifically BWIB because that's pretty much the more professional based club that I'm involved with. And as of right now, as a senior, that's kind of the only club that I've kind of stuck with all 4 years. So previously, I did work under one of the ASUC senators, so that was really interesting. And me and a co-director kind of worked on helping progress like mental health resources in specifically like the GBO program to help like incoming freshmen be aware of a lot more of those resources. And we partnered with Tang, so that was more of like personal development, and it felt nice to try to make like a positive kind of difference there. And I also was a part of the GBO program. I was a GBO leader my sophomore year, and that was definitely huge personal development just because it's different leading like a bunch of like kids, like 5-year-olds, and trying to be a leader of people who are essentially almost your age and trying to encourage them. So that was definitely like big for leadership development, but would definitely credit BWIB the most for more like career and professional development, like meeting people who are in different industries and know what they want to do. So BWIB was a huge part of where I'm going to end up. Yeah.
Awesome. And then do you want to touch really briefly on your role post grad? Because you mentioned you're a senior. So post grad, what are you doing?
Yeah, so my postgrad role is actually going to be kind of like the full-time program of what I did for my most previous internship. So I'm going to be doing the operations finance rotational program at Amazon. So basically, it's like a 2-year program where you rotate across a few different like operation segments within Amazon, but I will be focusing on like the finance aspect of those operations. So yeah.
Ooh, wait, that sounds so fun. And then really briefly, like, what did you do your freshman and sophomore year? Kind of like leading up to that junior year internship. Like, you mentioned some things like you didn't like and some things you liked. So could you walk us through that?
Yeah, so actually, I think I was lucky. I think the stars just kind of like aligned for me because this definitely wasn't like a plan that I had from freshman year. But considering now that I'm like in operations finance, I actually did an operations more focused internship and then a more finance based one. So it kind of set me up for this. But my freshman year, I did more of an operations based internship at Airbus in Germany. And then my sophomore year, I did kind of like private banking, financial analyst type of role at a bank here in Thailand. So I kind of got a little bit of the operations, a little bit of the finance. And I think for me, I thought that I was going to be one of those like banking kids going into that, which is kind of why I did my sophomore internship in that. But I realized like it was not quite my vibe. I
Yeah.
didn't really the environment that I kind of belonged in every day for the rest of my life. So I think Amazon offered me like a really good mix of what I enjoyed about operations with also, the numbers and still having that finance aspect. So I found my blend.
Awesome. Yeah. So were you only applying to Amazon your junior year, or were you kind of just like applying to like finance and operations roles, like, and then you just happened to get like an awesome blend? Like, how did that work out?
Yeah, so more so like for like junior year internships, I was like kind of all over the place. I don't know if I recommend that because then stuff isn't really tailored to like the companies that you're going for. So probably wouldn't recommend being all over the place your junior year. but I even applied to some marketing roles because I was like the VP of marketing in WIB, and I was like, oh, maybe I'm interested in that. But I think most of the ones that I pursued were more finance related. So I was also like considering if I wanted to maybe do an internship at Fidelity, which was again more like financial analysis, but really more in the finance industry, whereas Amazon was like more tech industry. So I was less focused, I think, more so on the industry and like, okay, I want to work with numbers and I want to kind of do an analysis type thing. So I was kind of more focused on those roles. But I think looking back, I'm quite glad that I got to end up interning in the tech industry just because I feel like that's such a huge thing now. Like tech is just booming always. So it's been really cool to like see that fast-paced environment from like the inside.
Yes, awesome. And then for the operations and finance, like you did do internships in those, but did you also take like classes that maybe interested you? Like for non-Berkeley people, we have to take like UGBA 10 where there's like a module on like operations and finance. Like did this just like happen to catch? Oh, and you also like marketing. So you were like an all around gal. But yeah, were there any like classes that really like pushed you towards that, or was it more so just like gaining that hands-on experience?
Yeah, so I again don't know if I'd recommend it. I think what you're going to
Uh-huh.
discover is kind of like the example of things that aren't meant to work out, but it did work out. So I actually didn't take a finance class until now, my senior year. I didn't take a marketing class until my senior year either. Didn't take an operations class. So I really maybe I would probably advise people to scope those out. But what I feel like I've kind of realized maybe more so from like UGBA 10, as well as like talking to a lot of people who are like older than me that already went into like internships and jobs, is that sometimes a lot of the classes don't necessarily reflect what it would 100% be like when you're like in the role. So for example, like finance is probably going to help you build a lot of core skills, but in my experience, like what I did in my internship was nowhere near the types of things that I was doing in my finance class. So in a way, it did kind of help me not go into it with like kind of a stereotype of
Right.
what it was going to be. So for me, I think it was really valuable to just learn on the job, because then like I'm like, okay, this is really what it would look like going into a full time. And now I know that I can pick things up on the job. Like I don't have to come in having all these core skills. So for me, I think it helped paint a better picture of what it would look like, because I don't think those classes always 100% reflect those kinds of careers, but it definitely helps build core skills. So I would probably recommend like looking into a couple of those classes, but it worked out fine for me as well.
Awesome. And then just really quickly touching on your double major in econ and business. And I know that they're definitely like two very like different disciplines, but also they have like kinds of their ins and outs. Like actually someone in my other club like did like a Haas spotlight and he was like talking about like the differences. So have you been able to like apply econ and business like to your job like currently? Like I know that the classes weren't as like hands-on as they are like in your real job, but how they kind of like trained your brain in a sense of approaching like your everyday role.
Yeah, I don't know if necessarily this is going to be how everyone feels about it, but taking both business and econ, I think they taught me different, more general skills. So my business classes have kind of taught me more like problem solving in a more creative way. Like you're sometimes dealing with situations that don't have like one correct answer. Like you're doing case studies or you're looking at like potential different routes that a business could take. So I think business was more like on the creative side and knowing how to back those up and problem solving there. And econ is kind of more like there's a right answer. Like, are you gonna the
Yeah.
number or not? So I think econ really helped me more with like those analytical skills on a detail basis. So for example, like my econometrics class, like was maybe not the easiest class I've ever taken, but it helped me understand a lot of like statistics and statistical models and like how to look at data. They taught you how to use R and everything. So I think a lot of my econ classes kind of helped me get down to more details and crunching those numbers on more of a less creative way and just like, just focusing on the numbers. So I think having like almost like both sides of your brain working kind of helped me build more of like a holistic way to approach problem solving more in the real world.
Yes, that's awesome. Actually, was considering taking econometrics, but I've just heard that it's really hard. But now I'm convinced maybe I should take it. And then also I was wondering, um, on like a daily basis, what do you typically do? I don't know if like Amazon, if you don't have to be like super specific, but what do you like typically do? Is it like financial modeling, like a lot of Excel? Yeah, like what does your typical day look like in your at your internship and then your role going forward?
Yeah, so I think my internship is gonna look a little different from my actual full-time role. I got to like shadow and like hang out and talk to a lot of people who were in the program full time. So that gave me like a pretty good picture of what they do. But the internship was more like project based. So instead of kind of mimicking exactly what the full-time role individuals were doing every day, they more so kind of gave the interns like their own personal project to work on. So for my internship, it was more so like I was given like, here's an area where we think like a new tool would be really helpful, or here's an area where like we don't know much about, or here's an area where we think that we can do better. And then it's kind of with guidance, obviously,
Yeah.
your job to come up with a way to kind of either analyze that or come up with a tool to like help make it better. So the internship was definitely more project based, and I spent kind of a lot of the days like working on my own personal project rather than like, doing the daily things that the full time did. But just from talking to full time people, I think like there is still a lot of flexibility with like project work to help areas where there's like things missing or so. But I think it is like as like a finance kind of job, there is a lot of spreadsheets and getting those numbers in line and kind of comparing those numbers. So I definitely foresee a lot of that in
Yeah.
the future, just maybe in a slightly different capacity than my actual internship.
We love Excel. I still don't know what VLOOKUP is, but it's okay. But thank you so much for explaining
I
that.
no Excel knowledge when I got into it. Once again, I should have prepped a lot better than I did, but I was quite lucky that I had a lot of support.
Yes, we love I don't even know. I feel like we all need to learn Excel, but then it's like I don't have the time or the it's fine. Um but yes, okay. Moving back a little bit more to like Cal and like I guess personal development because I think we were talking a little bit before this, like this school like kicks your booty, trying not to be but it definitely like teaches you a lot of lessons that aren't just like in the classroom if that makes sense. So, are there any like kind of like overarching lessons that you've learned from Cal and being a student here that you've like taken into interviews or just like your approach to life? Oh, I don't know if that's very like broad, but yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, a lot of it was just kind of learning how to be independent and problem solve on my own and kind of be resourceful on my own because I did kind of come from a fairly small high school. It was like an international school overseas, so like I was surrounded by a bunch of other expats, and there were maybe like 150 people in my grade compared to, I know there are some American schools where you graduate with like 800 people. And so I think I was very used to having a lot of resources kind of handed to me. Like teachers were always available, like counselors, there were like a large number to the amount of kids in each grade. Sports teams were incredibly accessible just because like there was a lot less competition to get on the team. So,
Yeah.
things worked out nicely at the time, but it just like coming to Berkeley, and it's a big school, it's a public school, and you're not going to get a lot of hand holding. Sometimes even if you seek out certain resources, it's going to be weeks until those resources are available to you. So I think for me, it just kind of taught me like how to stand on my own 2 feet and be resourceful, which I think is a skill that kind of also carries over to, real life jobs and interviews and stuff, because you're able to have these examples, either that be in schoolwork or in extracurriculars, where there are times when things just didn't go right, but you were able to use your resourcefulness or adaptiveness to make things happen. So I think that's something that's going to be really valuable in the workplace, because I don't think anyone out there is holding your hand either. So Berkeley, I think it's definitely hard, but it sets you up so that I think you can be a lot more successful in the real world, and it's not really sheltering you the way maybe a different type of education might.
Yes, for sure. No hand holding here. And you mentioned a little bit you mentioned a little bit about interviews. How did you like prepare for your interviews? Like, I honestly like I think that this is such a broad question, but basically like how did you break in? Like, were there any like books that you read or anything that you like did to prepare to like land your role at Amazon?
Yeah, so I think one of the difficulties for me, as I mentioned earlier, was I was a little all over the place for what I wanted to do in terms of my internship. So it wasn't necessarily that I was like interested in consulting. So I read all these consulting books, or I was really interested in investment banking. So I read all the resources there. I was like, I don't really know what I want to do. So I couldn't read every book on marketing and finance and operations. So I think for me, it was more so becoming more comfortable asking people for help when I needed it. And again, an example of someone who maybe didn't do everything they were supposed to. Like people are really big on like networking at people at companies and getting your foot in the door. And I didn't really do any of that because I didn't know where I wanted to go. So I didn't know who I was supposed to be like rubbing shoulders with. So instead, it kind of came down to trying to use a personal network at Berkeley to ask for help if I could. So I had friends who had done a lot of interviews in finance, but more like corporate finance rather than banking finance, and reaching out to them to see how they kind of did that. And I actually had a friend in BWIB, so BWIB again helping me out,
Oh,
but
yes.
she knew somebody who had done my internship the previous year, and she was
Oh,
super sweet, and she offered to like connect me with him and said, "Hey, do you want to ask him about his experience and how like the interview was for him?" And so I didn't know him at all, but I reached out to him and he was also super nice about it and was like, "Of course, like let's hop on a call. I can let you know how it went for me." So having like the insider info of someone who came from your school and did the exact same thing that you were trying to do was definitely like the most valuable kind of information I could get. Like I could go online and read a bunch of things about, for example, the Amazon interview process, but hearing it from someone who like experienced it firsthand and that, can like kind of talk to you on a more personal level, that was definitely like, I think I would credit a lot of getting the job to this random person who agreed to talk to me at Berkeley.
awesome. Yes, we love connections, but also authentic connections, guys. Yay. And then, so you're a senior now, and for the sake of time, this is my kind of last question. But if there was anything that you could say to your freshman self, your sophomore self, overall, just anybody like entering Cal or college in general, like what would be the advice that you give to them in terms of finding their path or, like I don't know, overall, just anything that you've learned that you really want to share.
Yeah, I would say don't feel bad about if your path or timeline doesn't look exactly like everyone else's, because I think that was also something I kind of struggled with at the beginning. I was like, do I want to do consulting? Like everyone's doing consulting. And I was surrounded by like a few friends who were like very into investment banking, which is why I kind of did a summer, not necessarily in investment banking, but in banking, because I was like, okay, everybody wants to do banking. Let's do that. And like that was not at all for me. And I think it took me a little longer than it should have to realize that that might be someone else's trajectory, but it's not necessarily mine. And I think, especially at Berkeley, when I personally feel like there are so many people who are achieving like really amazing things, like they're starting their own businesses and they're getting these amazing jobs at these huge firms. And
Mhm.
it can kind of become a lot. Like consulting and banking tend to have earlier timelines. So my friends already had internships and job offers, and I had like two interviews at that point.
Mhm.
So I was like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, great. I
Yes.
fall behind. But I definitely think like it's okay to realize that you're kind of on your own path and you don't have to do things other people's way. And I would say like don't get scared if you feel like you're too late to the game. Like for example, I said like I didn't network with companies like maybe the way that would be beneficial for me. But, in the end, like I turned out okay, I like to think.
Yeah.
So just kind of like don't be afraid if you feel like you're seeing other people doing things that you're not doing. Like you can follow your own pace and I think you'll end up fine. It might not feel like it in the moment, but in the end, I think you'll end up fine. So kind of just, work at your own pace. And it sounds very cliche, but I think I've realized from my own personal experience that it's probably cliche because it is true and people say it a lot. So
Yes, I needed to hear that, guys. This is personal. But I also think like there's like a quote that's like comparison can be like the thief of joy and stuff. So I definitely echo what Natalie has said. But yes, any final words? Maybe not. It's okay if you don't have any.
yeah, I'll shout out BWIB one more time because I've
Woohoo!
definitely like all those connections definitely and friends that I made have been such a huge help both academically and professionally. So really love you guys. So
Yes, shout out to BWIB. And with that, thank you, Natalie, for coming and chatting with me. And thank you, everybody who tuned in and watched this fun interview. We hope you got value from it. And yeah, have a good rest of your day. Bye.
thanks.